All right, so those of you who did make the note list actually update the form. What did you do? Who did it? Who did that part? Somebody did. Naomi? How'd you do that? Component will receive props, the lifecycle function. So what that does is run if your props change. So if you were passing in, say, the notes as a prop, is that what you were doing? Or a note? So if we pass in the note as a prop, and we add a lifecycle method, component will receive props. Every time the props change, that will run again. So we have an opportunity to do something with that data. So the prop then should be the note that we're ready to edit. Who else did this? I saw at least one more hand. Yeah, what'd you do?
I just passed the function to the parent child, and then I call the parent function of the child. Yeah.
So what'd you do with state?
I created a new, I did not pass the state. So like whenever the state is updated, I call on the function to the child.
Say it one more time.
So I created another like current state ID in main.js, and whenever the state, the ID changes downstairs, I pass it up there, and from there I can call the function down. It's a bit tricky.
Okay, I'm not sure I 100% follow. Let me see. What did you do? Same thing Naomi did. Okay. It's certainly not the only way you could do it, but it is one way to do it. Especially if note form really needs its own state. And I think it will be handy for it to have its own state when we do the WYSIWYG thing later. So I'm going to go ahead and do that because it's also kind of neat to show you how this works. So component will receive props, but we need a prop to pass down, right? Component will receive props. And that's actually going to receive an argument containing the new props. And remember, since this is will instead of did, that means this runs before the props actually get updated. But we have access to what they will be in this next props object. And this is all documented on this page in the React docs. Updating, okay, component will receive props. Invoked before a mounted component receives new props. If you need to update the state in response to prop changes, you may compare this.props and next props and perform state transitions using setState. So in other words, we have this.state.note, right? And if in reaction to something changing in our props, we need to change that, we can. So we need to pass something down in our props, like the current note, right? So one of you two, or you, if you did this too, did you add something new? What did you do in app.js or main.js? Did you like do what we talked about and add another thing to state to hold the current note ID or something like that? Okay, just the ID or the whole current note? What'd you do? Okay, so if you did just the ID, then we would also need to pass in the list of all the notes, right? Now, I think we happen to be doing that anyway because in main, we passed down all the props to note form. And then you could get it by ID. So since we happen to have done that, since we happen to have passed all the objects in, we could totally just put the ID in state. No big deal. So I think I'll choose to do it that way. So I'll say current note ID. That will also start out as null. And we'll pass that down. So again, in render main, we have this actions thing. I could make another one called const note data, maybe. And that could have this.state.notes, because we know we need to pass that down. So notes, this.state.notes, current note ID, this.state.current note ID. And then we can pass in, again, spread that out, note data. So now all those props will be sent down. And main is already passing down all the props into note form. So note form should receive that. So we need to set this .state.current node ID to the right thing when we click on something from the list, right? So we need a method that does that. Something like set current note ID. That should receive a node ID. And do this.setState current note ID to whatever node ID was passed in. So hey, there's an action. Set that to actions here. Set current node ID equals this dot set current node ID. Now it's getting passed down to main. And main needs to pass it on to note list, right? So set current note ID equals props dot set current note ID. I'm not going to send all the props down. Cert. So in note list .js, we need some sort of clickiness on these notes, right? So heck, it looks like we need set current note ID out of our props. And I think we're going to have to pass it all the way down here. Set current note ID equals set current note ID. Did I put brackets around it over here? Yeah, I did. This is now getting a little hard to read. There we go. So in Node.js, we could put an on-click on the LI itself. And again, we're going to need set current node ID out of here. And the on-click should be set current node ID, but we need the ID of this node. So I'm going to put an arrow function in here. And it's just going to call set current node ID and pass in, we have this node object. It's a note.id as an argument. Yeah.
Does OnClick work on LI? Because it did not work on my end, so I used unmouse down.
On what?
Unmouse down. OnClick doesn't
Okay. Okay, that must be a React thing. Yeah, so another thing you could do is wrap all this in a linky thing. So let's do that. On mouse down, I don't know whether on mouse down works when you hit enter on the keyboard if you have that thing focused. I know on click does. So I'm going to just wrap it in a link, basically. Let's see what happens. I want to watch my app state here. And now current node ID is null. If I click one, it just blew current node ID away. Because, let's see, set current node ID, I pass in the node ID. And on app, set current node ID, I set the state equal to whatever was passed in. So why didn't it like that? It set it to nothing. So something's not quite right there. So we need some homework. We are on day 9 now. Day 9 homework. Finish making this work, basically.
Are we supposed to work on the test one? The one you're working on? Project?
I mean, work on your own copy, ideally. If you already have it working, then, I mean, you could just change the way it works to be more like this. But basically, when you click on a note in the list, populate the form with the data from that note, make sure delete works. Once you do that, and yep, you're going to need, the way I'm doing it, you're going to need to use component will receive props. So make sure to look up how that works. Look up how component will receive props works. Bonus credit. I don't usually put that in all caps. Add another authentication method to your app, such as Twitter, Facebook, Google, email password, etc. See if you can repeat what we did with one of the others. Remember, the Firebase documentation is your friend. We'll make this super mega bonus credit and add another level here. I want this button over here to do what save and new does now, and I don't want save and new to be there. Remove the save and new button from note form and assign the same functionality to the button in the sidebar. the plus button in the sidebar. Make sense? So I will commit my work in progress here. I'll also put in the base requirements. Run, npm run deploy, or yarn deploy to update the version on GitHub pages. So every time you make changes, you'll have to deploy again for that to take effect. To do something in an app.js, to do, make this work. One more thing I'll just point out before you go. This isn't a homework thing or anything, but notice everything else that's in state on app, the UID, the current node ID, none of that gets synced with Firebase, right? Because when we sync with Firebase, we tell it only sync things at notes and only sync it with the notes part of my state. So none of that other stuff shows up in Firebase. All right. Enjoy your lunch. Go in peace, etc.